Hello, happy Friday and a very warm welcome to you all today, and thank you for joining us for our webinar on cybersecurity. My name is Helen and I'm the Marketing and Events Manager here at Stakeholders. I know many of you will have questions for our guest today. To put these forward, you can simply type them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen and we'll address them towards the end of the event. You can send them in at any time. So today's webinar will last around 45 minutes. You may have seen in your reminder email, some downloads are available via our website. Lisa will be referring to some of these during the event, so do please visit the event page on our website, stakeholders.com, to download them. There'll also be a link to them in the follow-up email that you'll receive tomorrow. So let's get started. Joining me today, I have Lisa Ventura. Lisa is not only an award-winning cybersecurity consultant, but also the CEO and founder of the UK Cybersecurity Association, UKCSA. As you'll soon discover, she is passionate about raising awareness of being more cyber aware, publishing 2 books to great acclaim. Lisa, perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about how you came to work in cybersecurity and what it is about the industry that drives your passion.
Good morning, Helen, and thank you for having me on the webinar today. I joined the cybersecurity industry in 2009 when I was involved with Titania Limited, a software development company for the industry. I've worked with BT on their Assure Cyber product. And then in 2018, I founded the UK Cybersecurity Association, and we're a membership association for individuals and businesses that actively work within the cybersecurity industry. But we also undertake a lot of other projects, one of which is around the whole cyber awareness piece for the general public, small businesses and SMEs, to help them be safe online and be more cyber aware. And I'm also involved in other projects to support women with entering the cybersecurity industry, because there's quite a big gender disparity within cyber today. I'm also involved in projects around the cyber skills gap, and also for those that are neurodiverse within cybersecurity. And what really drives me is that whole sort of piece around the hackers are just getting so sophisticated, and it's really, really important to me to stay as safe as possible. I've heard so many horror stories and seen, so many of my friends getting caught out with malicious links or being caught out to scammers. So for me, that's where that passion comes from, is trying to raise awareness of that to mitigate against cyber attacks.
Absolutely, so important. Thank you for that. What we normally do before we get started into the questions is to just launch a quick poll to understand a little bit more about who's online. So I'll do that now. So you should see something pop up on your screen, those of you online. There's 2 quick questions here. The first is, how prepared do you feel for a cybersecurity attack? Possible choices are very prepared, I think I'll be okay, a bit of a winging it approach there, and underprepared. And the second question is, longer term, do you see more of a hybrid approach when it comes to office working and working from home? So just 2 quick questions there. You can see lots of votes flooding in, thank you. I'm just going to leave it open for a few more seconds and then I will share the results with everyone online. And Lisa, perhaps if you could comment on the results once it's done. Okay, I'll just end it now and share the results. So you can see on the first question, most people do have that kind of a bit of a winging it approach, that they think it's going to be okay. And the least amount of people feel very prepared. Would you like to comment on that one first, Lisa?
Absolutely. So a lot of organisations do feel that they think that they'll be okay, and then unfortunately something will happen and they get caught out. It's encouraging to see that there's some people here feel that they're very prepared in the event of a cyber attack, and some that say that they feel that they're underprepared, and that's something that we work closely with the National Cybersecurity Centre to do, is to raise that awareness of being that bit more prepared for a cyber attack.
Thank you. And secondly, a resounding yes. on a hybrid approach to working from home. So I think that certainly from my own networks and friendship groups and colleagues, I think that does come across quite strongly now.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not at all surprised by that, and I think that's something we're definitely going to see, that more hybrid approach. So part of the time working from home, part of the time in the office, when hopefully the virus is a bit more under control.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you for that. Okay, we have one quick other poll before we get started, and this is, I won't share the results from this one, but it's more for sort of stakeholders' benefit for the angel investors online to understand a little bit more about how secure you feel with your investing preferences. So if you are an angel investor, how do you prefer to invest? 3 choices: via a regulated platform like Stakeholders, through an SPV, which is a special purpose vehicle, or third choice is just direct with the venture and entrepreneur themselves. So this is one just for our angel investors online, just to help us understand your investment preferences and how secure with the investments you make. Lovely. Thank you so much for all those who voted in those polls. Lovely. Okay, on to the questions. So first of all, Lisa, if you wouldn't mind tell us, what are the sort of top 3 things that every small business could do or prioritise when it comes to cybersecurity?
So there's lots of things that every small business should do when it comes to their cybersecurity posture. But the top 3 things that we advise at the UK Cybersecurity Association are to use strong password protection and authentication, such as 2-factor authentication wherever possible, install security software updates whenever they come up, and back up your files regularly. And finally, to embrace education and training and build a strong culture of cybersecurity awareness. There's many different types of cyber attacks, from phishing emails, malware and ransomware, as just a few. So education and awareness around these threats is crucial to help mitigate them. And the National Cybersecurity Centre has a guide to the common types of cyber attacks, which will provide some further guidance and information. And this is available in the resources on this webinar today.
Lovely. And when you say about backing up your data, I mean, does that mean backing up to the cloud, or do you get an external hard drive, or how would you sort of go about doing that in the best possible way?
Obviously, there's both ways of doing it. If you're backing up to the cloud, you need to do a lot of due diligence to make sure that the solution that you're using is as safe and secure as possible. And then, of course, there are the external hard drives, other devices and so on that you can use. We typically recommend a mix of the two, but always with any cloud provider or service, you really need to make sure you do your due diligence around which one you decide on.
Absolutely. And I suppose with the cloud, that can be done on an automatic basis, but with more manual ones, do you recommend sort of every 6 months you do it, or every financial year? Or
I tend to, if I'm picking up to external devices, I tend to do that at least monthly to keep up your data as up to date as possible. It's laborious, but it is so important.
Absolutely. Well, that's very interesting. Thank you. Okay, so when working from home, how can you keep your work data safe?
Well, it's important to follow the same processes that you would in the office for data protection, and adapting where necessary, of course. But there may need to be further precautions that you take when working from home. So to keep data confidential, it's a small thing, but you should always really lock your device if you're going to leave it unattended. And you should do this even if it's just your family that's in the house. And also follow the storage and other data protection procedures that may have been put in place. So for example, saving your files to a designated drive or system if you have network access, as documents will be much safer there than on your own hard drive. And this may already be what you do when you work in an office, or new procedures may have been put in place for remote working. And some of the other things that you should consider from a security perspective when working from home include making sure that your security software, such as firewalls and antivirus software, is up to date, setting secure passwords. So always having a strong password that are a combination of at least 10 lower and uppercase letters, numbers and symbols, keeping hard copies of your sensitive information safe as you would as if it was in physical form. You may still be handling letters or other hard copies when working from home, and to keep that safe and confidential, and never leave it lying around, and ideally store any of those documents in a safe place where there's a low possibility of other people accessing them.
Absolutely. And I think what you said about even around family members, I mean, from personal experience, we're homeschooling, you know, so for myself and my husband, we've changed our settings so that our computer sleeps after a much shorter period of time, because if you're pulled away to quickly put them onto a live lesson or whatever it may be, and you've got to suddenly make sure that your computer is password protected, you know, in the quickest amount of time. So that's certainly relevant in our household. We've got a 5-year-old who likes to press buttons. Okay, so what are the warning signs that your business is under threat?
So some of the warning signs that you might spot, which may signify that your business is under threat from a cyber attack, include suspicious looking email addresses, and phishing emails are accountable for many attacks and is one of the most common techniques of a cyber attack. And checking email addresses is really imperative if the content is to do with any government, tax office, or any other emails that you may have requested that contain details of payments, refunds or charges. And you need to look closely at the email address, as an incorrect one may often have an odd symbol or a character in it, or it may be a completely unrelated email address compared to the content of your email. And of course, as we're all so busy, it's really easy to miss something like that when you look at an email address or something at first glance. And another way to detect if an email is a scam one is to look at the spelling and grammar. And it sounds a bit silly really to think you have to check this, but scam emails often come with grammatical errors, whereas of course legitimate emails do not. And we'll talk a bit more about phishing emails specifically later in this webinar. So look as well at your password activity, as these may have been compromised unknowingly. And sometimes you may get an email requesting a password reset, which may not be by you, and that could be the first sign of your account being compromised. So you should reset your password immediately, following the advice mentioned on using 10 characters and a mix of symbols and upper and lowercase letters, etc. Keep an eye as well on your bank activity and transaction activity. If you find suspicious transactions, or that your account balance is decreasing abnormally, you may have had transactions that haven't been made by yourself. So you should alert your bank as soon as possible, as that could potentially mean a cyber attack has taken place. And it's a good idea to also regularly check your account to be absolutely sure, because if you leave it without checking it for a long time, the consequences could be a lot more disastrous. And if you feel that you're a victim of such an attack, you need to highlight at the start of any phone call to your bank that you've been a victim of a cyber attack, to be prioritised accordingly. And another potential sign could be that your network may have suddenly slowed, as when somebody attempts to hack into your system. There often tends to be a spike in network traffic, and that can result in the performance of your systems and networks overall being slower than usual. It could be another issue that's causing it. So always get in touch with a professional and your technical team if you experience this. And if you notice that speeds are slower than usual, always alert your IT provider so they can investigate and block any malicious or unusual activity.
Wow, there's so much to think about, isn't it? And especially for small businesses, when you're talking about looking at bank accounts, they may not have an accounting team or a payroll team or whatever, because they're small businesses. It's, you know, it's up to them to stop, put the busyness away for a second and really focus and check that everything's in order in the account. Absolutely. And what happens if you get an email from someone who it looks like a genuine email that you know, but the content or the request within it might be a bit strange? I mean, we had one recently asking about, can you purchase an Amazon gift card for us? But the person we knew How does that work? What are the warning signs?
So that's typically known as CEO fraud, and it obviously may not necessarily be the CEO. It could be, yeah, but as you mentioned, the finance department or another department. If it typically it just may not come across or be in the style of what you would usually expect. So always, be on the lookout for that. And if you get an email and it's from someone and the style of how it's written, or if there's grammatical errors that they wouldn't typically make, or you just have a gut feeling that it's not quite right, don't click on anything on it, and also report it. And I'll come on to how you can do that to Action Fraud in the National Cybersecurity Centre's phishing reporting line as well. And again, because we're so busy, it's so easy to miss something like that. And that, unfortunately, is where I've heard of a lot of people getting caught out, because they've had a request to transfer some money and thinking that, it is their finance director or somebody within their organisation has gone ahead, but it's actually been that their email account's been compromised by hackers. And unfortunately, then they've fallen victim to a cyber attack. So when it comes to things like payment requests and can you purchase, as you just mentioned, the Amazon gift cards, something like that, reread it, and if in doubt, check. Contact the person. Did you send this email? Can I just check that this is something you definitely want me to go ahead with? Never just go ahead and do it. Always ensure that you fully look into it and check with the person that sent the email as well.
Great, thank you so much. What would be the impact of an attack?
So a successful cyber attack can cause major damage to a business, and it can affect your bottom line as well as your standing and consumer trust. And the impact of a breach can be divided into three categories. So that's financial, reputational, and also legal. And cyber attacks can often result in substantial financial loss, and that can arise from theft of corporate information, the theft of financial information such as bank details or payment card details, the theft of money, disruption to trading, so inability to carry out transactions online, and the loss of business or contracts. And businesses that have suffered a cyber breach will also generally incur costs associated with repairing affected systems, networks and devices, as well as suffering reputational damage. And with trust being an essential element of all customer relationships, cyber attacks can really damage your business's reputation and erode any trust that your customers have for you. And that could in turn lead potentially to a loss of customers, loss of sales, and a reduction in profits. And the effect on reputational damage can even have an impact on your third-party suppliers and affect relationships that you have with your partners, investors, and any other third parties that are vested in your business.
Yes, it's devastating really in every way. So how do you avoid phishing attacks?
Well, in a typical phishing attack, scammers will often send fake emails to thousands of people asking for sensitive information such as bank details or containing links to malicious websites. They might trick you into sending money to steal your details to sell on, or they may even have political or ideological motives for accessing your organization's information. And phishing emails are getting much, much harder to spot, and some will get past even the most observant users. I mean, I can give you an example of myself. I was extremely busy one day, received an email that looked like it came from TV licensing, and it had arrived just as my TV license was due for renewal. So even though I did a double take on it and looked at it, for that split second, I could have easily have thought, oh, my license is due for renewal, I better click on that and do something about it. And I stopped, and on closer inspection, I could see that it was a phishing attempt by the way it was constructed, by the spelling and grammar that was used. And I just wanted to use that as an example, because if you're really busy, as I was when that email arrived, it's so easy to click on a phishing email unwittingly. And whatever your business or however big and small it is, you will receive phishing email attacks at some point. But you also need to be aware that there's a limit to what you can expect your users to do in terms of combating phishing attacks. But there are a few things that you can do to mitigate against them. one of the first things is to configure your accounts to reduce the impact of a successful phishing attack. So you could configure your staff's accounts using the principle of least privilege, which means giving your staff the lowest level of user rights required to perform their jobs. So if they are a victim of a phishing attack, the potential damage is reduced. And to further reduce the damage that can be done, you can ensure your staff don't browse the web or check emails from an account with administrator privileges, which is a user account that allows you to make changes that will affect other users. So typically they can change security settings, install software and hardware, and access all files on a system. So if an attacker, having gained authorized access to administrator account, this can be far more damaging than accessing a standard one, and also use two-factor authentication on your important accounts, such as email. So even if an attacker knows your passwords, they still won't be able to access their account because they'll have to enter a code that may have gone to a mobile device, and so on. So another thing you can do is, as I mentioned before, is to check the obvious signs of phishing, because expecting your staff to identify and delete all phishing emails is quite an impossible request and would have a detrimental effect on business productivity. But many phishing emails still fit the mold of a traditional attack. So look for things like the fact that many phishing scams originate from overseas, so the spelling, grammar and punctuation, etc. are poor, which I mentioned earlier. And a lot of them will try to create official looking emails by including logos and graphics. So looking at the design and the quality, is it what you'd expect from a large organization such as, say, PayPal, for example? And is it addressed to you by name, or does it refer to a valued customer or friend or colleague? And that's a sign that the sender doesn't know you and that it's part of a phishing scam. And does it contain a veiled threat that asks you to act urgently? So be very suspicious of phrases like send these details within 24 hours, or you've been the victim of crime, click here immediately. Also look out for emails that appear to come from a high-ranking person, as we talked about earlier, CEO fraud, requesting the payment is made to a particular bank account. And look at some of the advice that I mentioned earlier about checking with that person. Does it sound legitimate, or do you think it's trying to mimic the style of someone that you know? So email filtering services attempt to send phishing emails to spam or junk folders, but the rules determining these need to be fine-tuned for your organization's needs. So if they're too open and suspicious emails are not sent to spam or junk folders, the users will have to manage many emails, which will add to their workload and leave open the possibility of clicking something that is a spam email. But if your rules are too strict, some legitimate emails could get lost. So you'll have to manage the best way to ensure the best compromise.
Yeah, balance, right, isn't it?
Yeah.
With the one that I received, it was the sort of flag that came up was that there were no pleasantries around it. It was like, I need to buy an Amazon gift card. Please send money. You know, it was just very, no, hi, how are you doing? You know, it was just looked odd, like you said. It raised some flags. So that's really interesting. Thank you. Sorry, did you want to carry on with something?
Just one more thing to say is make sure that you and staff are encouraged to ask for help if they think they've been a victim, and especially if they've not raised it before. And don't punish anyone if they get caught out, because it discourages people from reporting it in the future and can make them, fearful that they spend excessive time and energy scrutinizing every single email that they receive. But if you think that your organization has been the victim of a phishing attack, you can report this through the Action Fraud website, and also report phishing emails to the National Cybersecurity Association via report@phishing.gov.uk. And I've also got a guide that's being put out from the National Cybersecurity Centre that's in the resources on preventing phishing attacks, which will provide some further guidance and information.
Brilliant, thank you. So what's the best way of sharing documents online?
You should always consider encrypting the hard drive of your computer or laptop if you're using it to work from home. This is the process through which data and information is converted into code to prevent unauthorized access. It doesn't prevent a provincial hacker from gaining access, but it means that if unauthorized access to the data is gained, all they see is random code, so it's of no use to a hacker. So as an example, the file type may be a Word document, but when encrypted, the hacker could change it to a name that may require them to label it as something different. And as the operating system doesn't know the file type they encrypted the document with can be opened, it then blocks access to that file. So the best thing to do is to have a backup of all your files, as any data that you have will not be lost, and you'll have another copy stored somewhere else.
Perfect, thank you. Are there particular sectors that are more vulnerable?
So a recent report that came up from OGL Computer revealed how technology decision makers at UK SMEs are prioritising their cybersecurity to ensure business continuity and growth. And the report also highlighted various different verticals that had there were at significant risk of cyber attacks, and those such as healthcare. And certainly we've seen that in the past year with the coronavirus pandemic, lots and lots of different scam emails, especially around the vaccine or the people that are shielding and so on. It's been a massive problem in the last year. And also the IT and telecoms and legal industries top the list when it comes to those sectors that are at risk of suffering cyber attacks. So some of the key reasons that these industries are attacked, starting with healthcare, is that providers within healthcare are susceptible to supply chain attacks that will exploit the chain of trust and target valuable personal data which healthcare providers store and process. And suppliers can be seen as more vulnerable and a much easier route for attackers to gain access through more lucrative targets. Hospitals also store a very large amount of valuable confidential patient data, which hackers can then sell on easily. Within IT and telecoms, some IT companies may also store large amounts of sensitive customer data, and cloud storage and computing service providers, the developers of security software or file sharing solution providers are often the targets of supply chain compromise attempts. The legal sector as well is particularly vulnerable to cyber attacks due to the volume of data, sensitive information, financial responsibility and authority held. And if a law firm specialises in corporate or property law, they're often deemed at increased risk, as the potential for financial gain is a lot greater. And although the main reason law firms are targeted is for financial gain, there's also been a growth in bad actors using cyber attacks to achieve political, economic or ideological goals when it comes to getting into systems. Manufacturing as well has seen a huge increase, and this includes automotive, electronics and pharmaceutical companies. And it is because intellectual property held in this industry is often incredibly valuable, as firms rely on specific software packages that are difficult to patch against recent exploits, and that makes them much more vulnerable to attack. And finally, the financial sector threats increasing organisations that working directly and indirectly within the financial sector go beyond simple theft. With the cyber threats that are faced by banks, insurance companies, asset managers and other similar organisations, range from basic consumerware malware all the way up to highly targeted attacks from organised criminals and state-sponsored actors. And financial service providers are often the hacker's favourite, given the nature of the private information that's held by those organisations.
Wow, it's so such a broad span, isn't it? It's no one is safe. So on a slightly different note, if employees leave on a bad note, what protocols do you need to put in place? So because we're no longer in an office environment, how do you ensure that no data is leaked?
So users are an organisation's greatest strength, but also, unfortunately, can also be their greatest liability. While user education won't stop a malicious insider, it will go a long way to preventing an inadvertent security breach by someone who got phished or misused, say, a public Wi-Fi hotspot, or who left files shared when they shouldn't have. And it can also give them the knowledge that they need to recognise when someone else is doing something that they shouldn't, so they can say something about it. And education will turn into part of the solution rather than being part of the problem. But some of the things that you can do is looking at your dormant accounts and orphan accounts. So how many idle accounts are in your directory? How many users who are no longer with your organisation still have accounts, and how many will access groups for legacy teams that haven't accessed the system in years, and how many users have permissions that they inherited from a colleague for a project that perhaps no longer exists, but still gives access to sensitive data and information. So these are all user access hygiene issues that should be addressed on a routine basis. You can also look at implementing strong authentication. So having valid credentials makes an attacker's job much easier. And whether those are gleaned from a phishing attack or a compromised third-party site or stolen from a colleague's desk, the outcome is still the same. So passwords should require a good minimum complexity, which I talked about earlier, and also should never be used in multiple locations. And how often they should be updated as well. Most organisations put in a 90-day turnaround so that passwords should be updated. And also have a look at compromised accounts, which can be a major issue. So whether that's an account compromised through phishing or a drive-by web hijacked or malware on a workstation, the threat is still the same. So look at detecting compromised accounts as an important tool for reducing the insider threat, and also look at stopping data exfiltration as well. So what motivates an attacker and what they're after can vary widely. One frequent target is, of course, intellectual property, which makes protecting data vital. So place appropriate controls on that data, monitor its access, and prevent unauthorized movement can stop a malicious actor from achieving those aims, even if they do manage to get inside.
Thank you. So how do you prioritise what assets are critical to the business?
So this is going to vary widely from business to business, and every organisation should first identify their mission critical information. So assets that, if compromised, would cause major damage to the business. And different industries hold different forms of data, or they could hold the same data but with varying degrees of importance. So some data types that organisations may consider as their crown jewels, so to speak, include competitive information. So this type of data is often at the core of every business because it may involve business secrets or research and development information, or any kind of information that gives a business its competitive advantage. So that could be long-held business secrets that define the company's identity. For example, for a pharmaceutical company, it could be the formulas of their products. It could be the makeup of one of the COVID vaccines, for example. And that could include collected operational data, such as competitor information, production data, and customer metrics. Legal information as well, so documents like copyrights and contracts that have a legal bearing are some of the most confidential and crucial information that organisations can protect. Personally identifiable information. So this particular type is at the heart of many data protection laws and could be customer or employee information that could be used to identify individuals. And data from daily operations. So depending on the business, any of the other types of information could fall into this category of data. And each department in an organisation may have specific data that they modify or use every day and is necessary for the company's daily operations. So how can organisations look to protect some of this mission critical assets and data? So the first step would be to know their data better than anybody else. And some of the recommendations for this will be to map the data that you hold, so know what data is being collected and where it's stored. And organisations should also note the information that can be garnered from the combination of different data when analysed together, which will give an overview of the areas or departments that hold critical data. Identifying what it is from the map. So from that map data, organisations can begin to identify and reevaluate what their mission critical data is. And this should be done to prioritise security resources and identify the risk level that they're prepared to take to defend those assets, and assess the threats. So organisations should anticipate and recognise the possible threat actors that might target the information and assets that they hold. And this can help them design and prepare defences that can then defend from known techniques of malicious actors, and also plan and implement necessary security measures. So using the knowledge gathered, organisations can then begin to formulate the appropriate security measures to protect their critical assets. And a good place to start will be to ensure that the encryption of data that's both at rest and in transit will reduce the impact of it falling into the wrong hands.
Thank you so much. Very thorough answer. We've got quite a few investors on the line this morning. As an investor, what data should they be privileged to, and what can entrepreneurs rightly withhold for fear of a cyber attack?
So weak controls of data privacy and security measures can create a material risk for investors, and data protection has become a critical part of the analysis that many will often undertake. Investors are also increasingly seeking more information on a range of cyber topics, including corporate awareness and preparedness, risk management, data protection and post-breach management, board-level cyber governance, corporate disclosure, mergers and acquisitions due diligence, and regulatory and cybersecurity developments. So obtaining and assessing information on cyber risk management is not a straightforward exercise, and there are few universally accepted standards and metrics to measure, assess and compare cyber risks. So cyber risks and therefore cybersecurity is constantly and always evolving. So for that reason, investors should continuously monitor and assess the state of their company's cyber environment by engaging with them and examining their governance practices and procedures. And also cyber risk should be managed at a senior level and cascade down. And the way the board manages cyber issues is vital, as they're ultimately held accountable when risks do materialise. As a result, everywhere we're now seeing that boards are committing to cyber risk management, whether or not a cyber attack or an issue has materialised, and also running a lot of exercises to see what how they would react to a particular cyber attack.
Fantastic, thank you. What are the long-term implications of working from home? We saw in the poll there that everyone online thought that we will be working in some sort of hybrid way for the long term. So what are the long-term implications of working from home? Can you hear me?
Hello?
Hi, can you hear me?
Oh, you're back. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just going on to say, we saw on the poll earlier, Lisa, that 100% of people thought that they would be working in some sort of a hybrid approach. So my question to you is, what are the long-term implications of working from home?
So poor cybersecurity habits among employees have raised questions about the future of remote working, but it does look like we're going to be moving into more of a hybrid model post-pandemic. So despite remote working being generally perceived as a driver of productivity and an enabler of a healthier work-life balance, there's a lot that needs to be done to ensure that that people are safe when working from home from an online and cybersecurity perspective. And the National Cybersecurity Centre has a guide to cybersecurity and working from home remotely, which provides further information on this. And a recent report from CyberArk argues that businesses will be forced to reconsider the long-term viability of working from home, mostly because people are failing to comply with company security policies. And the report also explained that remote workers are guilty of all manner of security-related infractions, from using company devices for personal activities, logging into private email accounts, browsing social media and shopping sites, for example, on company devices, to sharing passwords with other members of the household, and also installing unauthorized applications. So all these factors will combine to erode the cybersecurity posture of an organisation and put its sensitive data at risk. And also less than half of remote working employees in the report haven't received any cybersecurity training that might help them to work from home a lot more securely. So for this reason, business decision makers are often now looking to consider taking employees back to the office when lockdown is lifted and the pandemic subsides. But the remote working and office working hybrid model does have considerations that need to be addressed.
Absolutely. Just one last final quick question before we go on to, we've had quite a few questions come into the Q&A, but you mentioned earlier that the phishing guide, are there other guides available?
There are. So we work closely with the National Cybersecurity Centre to cascade information out to organisations about how they can better protect themselves online against the growing cyber threat. And I referred to these at various points throughout this discussion. But I also recommend the NCSC's 10 Steps to Cybersecurity Guide for more practical help and advice, which is also available as a resource.
Fantastic, thank you so much. Okay, well, we'll go on to a few of the questions. I know we're running a little bit short of time because there's so much to say on the subject, but I've had a few questions in. The first one is, do you use a password manager? And if so, which one would you recommend?
I do use a password manager, and there are quite a few of them out there. I use LastPass because it's easy to implement and integrate and so on. And these could have good benefits if you're using a different password for different accounts and so on. But again, always due diligence and check on different ones that are out there on the market.
Perfect, thank you. We had another question in. There is a growing number of small companies introducing ultra-fast fibre broadband, especially in rural areas. Are these networks going to be as secure as the larger established companies like BT?
I'm hearing this as well, and a lot of people are getting regular denial of service issues. I think for me, it's always to use one of the more well-known ones. But some of the companies in rural areas, I know there's one near me that have this particular issue. I think eventually they will be as secure, but as ever, always do your due diligence and look into these and the pros and cons of each one.
Great, thank you. Another question, can you provide the website where you can report if you get attacked?
Yeah. So the National Cybersecurity Centre has a phishing helpline address, which is report, which is phishing at, I think it's report.gov.uk. I'll share the exact details with Helen so we can get that out to you.
And that in the follow-up email you received tomorrow.
Lovely. And also the Action Fraud website as well.
Brilliant. What easy-to-use software can you use to encrypt your data?
There's one that I use called BitLocker, which I can highly recommend. And again, there's others out there on the market, but do your due diligence in looking at the pros and cons of each one to find the best one for your organisation and your needs.
Lovely. I think we've got time for one more, which is, if your children also have to use your laptop or PC, is there some way to keep the encryption to just your admin account?
I believe that there is, and I've got 2 accounts set up for that nature. Or you could always consider giving them a lower level access rather than an admin account.
Lovely. One more quick one's come in. Is there a simple software to show for a small company who is accessing the system which accounts have accessed and last used it?
I'll come back to that one if I may, Jeff. There are a couple out there on the market. But again, if I give that information to stakeholders, they can pop that in the email that goes out tomorrow to you as well.
Fantastic. Okay, I think that brings all our questions to a close for today. I'll just finish off by saying thank you so much, Lisa, for joining us today and giving up your time. It's been an absolute privilege having you with us, so thank you so much. For those of you who have been watching, you'll receive an email tomorrow, as we've said, with a link to the recording, as well as all the details we've mentioned with the uploads. Ollie Barrett is joining us on Tuesday. He's been described by Wired magazine as the most connected man in Britain. So he'll be talking about how to harness the power of your network. And on the 9th of February, we're joined by the CEO of one of our own ventures, Tim Sandford, and we'll be putting his sustainable food business, New Unlimited, in the virtual spotlight. And you can find details of how to sign up to both of these events in the follow-up email. They do get booked up quickly, and like today's event, often gets sold out. So do please register as early as you can to avoid disappointment. One final plea from me is to take the very short survey that will pop up on your screen in a moment. It really does help us tailor our events programme to your needs. And I'll just end today's event with a quote from Henry Ford. The only real security a person can have in this world is a reserve of knowledge, experience, and ability. So I hope you can join us again soon. Stay safe.